Part 2, Stories of Love and Adventure. Chapter 6 is 8 Brief Tales of Lovers. And we have this woman, like, yeah, I'm running away here. And this man, I guess he's running too because he's like that, but maybe he's a little not trying as hard to catch up. And it looks like there's something in between them. But the drawing by the tree, with the dark clouds behind, I don't know, but it looks like a sheet curled up, but it kind of, the form of it reminds of like a lion, or like a lion more than a snake, but So we start with Pyramus and Thisbe. The story is found only in Ovid. It is quite characteristic of him at his best, well told, several rhetorical monologues, a little essay on love, by the way. Once upon a time, the deep red berries of the mulberry tree were white as snow. The change in color came about strangely and sadly. The death of 2 young lovers was the cause. Pyramus and Thisbe. He, the most beautiful youth, and she, the loveliest maiden of all the East, lived in Babylon, the city of Queen Semiramis, in houses so close together that one wall was common to both. Growing up thus side by side, they learned to love each other. They longed to marry, but their parents forbade. Love, however, cannot be forbidden. The more that flame is covered up, the hotter it burns. Also, love can always find a way. It was impossible that these two whose hearts were on fire should be kept apart. Well, people are in control of their behavior, not necessarily judging the behavior right away, because we're not getting into that just yet. In the wall both houses shared, there was a little chink. No one before had noticed it, but there is nothing a lover does not notice. Our 2 young people discovered it, and through it they were able to whisper sweetly back and forth. Thisbe on one side, Pyramus on the other. The hateful wall that separated them had become their means of reaching each other. But for you, we could touch, kiss, they would say. But at least you let us speak together. You give a passage for loving words to reach loving ears. We are not ungrateful. So they would talk. And as night came on, they must part. Each would press on the wall kisses that could not go through to the lips on the other side. Every morning, when the dawn had put out the stars, and the sun's rays had dried the hoarfrost on the grass, they would steal to the crack, and, standing there, now utter words of burning love, and now lament their hard fate, but always in softest whispers. Finally a day came when they could endure no longer. They decided that very night they would try to slip away and steal out through the city into the open country, where at last they could be together in freedom. They agreed to meet at a well-known place, the tomb of Ninus. Under a tree there, a tall mulberry full of snow-white berries, near which a cool spring bubbled up. The plan pleased them, and it seemed to them the day would never end. At last the sun sank into the sea, and the night arose. In the darkness Thisbe crept out and made her way, in all secrecy, to the tomb. Pyramus had not come. Still she waited for him, her love making her bold. But all of a sudden she saw, by the light of the moon, a lioness. Oh, that is supposed to be a lion, but it looked like a she. Didn't have any animal features per se. The fierce beast had made a kill. Her jaws were bloody, and she was coming to shake her thirst in the spring. She was still far away for Thisbe to escape, but as she fled, she dropped her cloak. The lioness came upon it on her way back to her lair, and she mounted and tore it before disappearing into the woods. That is what Pyramus saw when he appeared a few minutes later. Before him lay the blood-stained shreds of the cloak, and clear in the dust were the tracks of the lioness. The conclusion was inevitable. He never doubted that he knew all. Thisbe was dead. He had let his love, a tender maiden, come alone to a place full of danger, and not been there first to protect her. "It is I who killed you," he said. He lifted up from the trampled dust what was left of the cloak, and kissing it again and again carried it to the mulberry tree. "Now," he said, "you shall drink my blood too." He drew his sword and plunged it into his side. The red blood spurted up over the berries and dyed them a dark red. Thisbe, although terrified of the lioness, was still more afraid to fail her lover. She ventured to go back to the tree of the tryst, the mulberry with the shining white fruit. She could not find it. A tree was there, but not one gleam of white was on the branches. As she stared at it, something moved on the ground beneath. She started back shuddering, but in a moment, peering through the shadows, she saw what was there. It was Pyramus, bathed in the blood and dying. She flew to him and threw her arms around him. She kissed his cold lips and begged him to look at her, to speak to her. "It is I, your Thisbe, your dearest," she cried to him. At the sound of her name, he opened his heavy eyes for one look, and death closed them. She saw his sword fallen from his hand, and beside it her cloak, stained and torn. She understood all. "Your own hand killed you," she said, "and your love for me. I, too, can be brave. I, too, can love. Only death would have had the power to separate us. It shall not have that power now." She plunged into her heart the sword that was still wet with his life's blood. The entities were pitiful at the end, and the lover's parents too. The deep red fruit of the mulberry is the everlasting memorial of these true lovers, and one urn holds the ashes of the two whom not even death could part. Now, isn't there like a white, kind of like the grape? Like there's the red grape, and then there's the pale grape. But the mulberry's closer to white, I would think. Orpheus and Eurydice. The account of Orpheus and the Argonauts is told only by Apollonius of Rhodes, a 3rd century Greek poet, 3rd century BCE, right? The rest of the story is told best by 2 Roman poets, Virgil and Ovid, in very much the same style. The Latin names of the entities are therefore used here. Apollonius influenced Virgil a good deal. Indeed, any one of the 3 might have written the entire story as it stands. The very earliest musicians were those considered to be gods. Athena was not distinguished in that line, but she invented the flute, although she never played upon it. Hermes made the lyre and gave it to Apollo, who drew from it sounds so melodious that when he played in Olympus, the entities forgot all else. Hermes also made the shepherd pipe for himself and drew enchanting music from it. Pan made the pipe of reeds, which can sing as sweetly as the nightingale in spring. The Muses had no instrument peculiar to them, but the voices were lovely beyond compare. Next in order came a few mortals so excellent in their art that they almost equaled the performers that were considered to be divine. Of these, by far the greatest was Orpheus. On his mother's side, he was more than mortal. He was the son of one of the Muses and a Thracian prince, His mother gave him the gift of music, and Thrace, where he grew up, fostered it. In Judaism, a lot of Jews consider the mother to be the one that gives a person Judaism. Well, that's a way to put it, right? The Thracians were the most musical of the peoples of Greece, but Orpheus had no rival there or anywhere except those considered to be gods alone. There was no limit to his power when he played and sang. No one and nothing could resist him. And